Greetings ladies and gentlemen, Hydra here from Roll Corruption. Second tips video today. Thank you very much for all the comments on the first, hugely appreciated, been inspired to carry on. Now today we're going to be talking about incidents, hooks and obstacles, leading on from our previous tip video where we talked about plot and using that to engage players or keeping players engaged with what's going on. So by the end of this video, you're going to come away with a decent understanding of how to put good incidents into your games, how to put good obstacles and challenges into your game that are going to be interesting for the players, interesting for you, and interesting for anyone else that may be watching or observing. So, without any further ado, we need to touch on, well, the incident situation. So, someone wants something and is having difficulty getting it. That is an implication that a plot contains potential incidents, so it's a good starting point. And it's a phrase you will have seen individuals such as How to Be a Great GM use. And this is because between point A and point B, if it is a linear journey of just simply travelling from place to place to place to place, without anything going wrong, what you don't have is a plot. What you have is journalism. It is a sequence of informative events that serve no other purpose. And what you have from that is a complete lack of any tension, any drama, or anything really that the viewer can extract on a deeper level and take home with them. Now, that sounds like a sort of a metaphorical goodie bag load of nonsense, but really that's why human beings tell stories. And I would say TTRPGs are stories unfolding in front of you on the table, between you and your players, not just generated by yourself as a GM. And it is within stories that we need something to take from. So what do I mean by that? Well, Aristotle does a good way of, he has a good way of explaining this. It's men that are in action, is firstly one quote he states, but action he defines as a combination of thought and process, or thought and action, and it will be done in response to incidents. So things will go wrong, and from that, we as the viewer or the consumer can emulate the behaviour of the hero or avoid it depending on the consequences. So this is why we tell stories. I was at the shop the other day and I said to this person, "Core, you look flippin' fit." And they slapped me around the face. That is a useful story because we can say, well, maybe that's not the way you would chat up someone in a grocery store. Perhaps a poor example, but that's the purpose of a story, is to take something out of it. So incidents are what give you opportunities to put tension, drama, decisions and excitement into your setting, and thus they're essential. And a story is a sum total of incidents between A and B. So the other thing we need to ask ourselves is, what sort of obstacles can we put in the way here? And I really like what Aaron Sorkin, he's the writer of West Wing, the first 4 seasons, which I hear are the good ones, and a very accomplished writer. I've just been digesting some of his course, and he states that there's really no obstacle too large, provided your precipitating event makes it obvious that there is a need for the resolution between A and B. It is absolutely fine to throw an entire army between point A and point B and have the players have to get there. Absolutely fine. It is that creates the tension and that creates the drama. It is that thought of, oh my god, how are we going to do this? That is almost essential to a decent hero story, because you as the reader, the GM and the player all need to simultaneously be thinking, that's a tough one. Good luck. So we now start with a few criteria that we can use to create incidents that are good for our sessions, good for our stories, good to put in. This will be assuming you've created your plot and you have an idea of a and a B, therefore, and a precipitating event that sets it all in motion. So let's take, for example, the group are heading out of town to the next town along because one of the group members has a sickly child and they only have a week to live, but in the next town along they have been told is a herbalist that can cure any ailment known to man, an absolute magic worker. not in the traditional sense of magic. Pure herbalism, of course. But, and that's where the but comes in, and this is where Aaron Sorkin says that you need a but, an if, or a then, otherwise you don't have an actual plot in mind, or you don't have the full thought process there with you. The adventurers were heading out of town, but the road was closed due to bandits on the road. Bandits so well armed with black powder weapons and swashbucklers that there was no hope in defeating them. The road was closed due to a landslide. It was deemed impassable, and given the new, let's call it a cauldron that has been formed between these landslides, rock trolls have decided to set up camp. Stone trolls, apologies if you're more of a Warhammer fan. So this is where we've got a plot, and this is where we've got some sense of someone wants something real bad and they're having difficulty getting it. You want to get to the next town and it's difficult because XYZ. Good, now we're getting somewhere. So now we can come to our first incident. The players may not be aware of the issues right now, so they'll set out of town and head along. Oof, there's a landslide. This is the first obstacle. Can they go over it? Looks challenging. Okay, well, surely going around it would be far safer. We'll take the road back and go around. Well, you have time constraint. You don't have time to go around. You as a player, and a GM rather, need to be thinking for the obvious, easy solutions, and you need to think of a circumstance that doesn't have any that are clearly telegraphed to the players, because otherwise, in my opinion, you're wasting their time. If the players run down a ravine being chased by goblin wolf riders and they arrive at a river that is fast flowing and filled full of jagged rocks, and for a moment there it sounds like we have a tense, dramatic situation, but there is a tree slightly off centre leaning over the waterway that looks precariously balanced. You've just killed all dramatic tension. All of it's just gone, because the players now know that their fate is decided by a strength test, which is fine if that was their idea that they had come up with after a period of panic and concern, because that's part of a mini hero journey. A combat encounter on its own is a mini hero journey of, there's really bad things happening, what are we going to do? Here's an idea, there's a solution, enact solution, resolution. That's a mini hero journey within a combat encounter. What you need to make sure you're not doing as a GM, in my opinion, is deciding how they're going to get out of these incidents, because in my opinion, that is the worst type of incident, one that has very clearly defined ways of dealing with it that are obvious, because then the viewer, which is you and the players, or the people that aren't acting in that scene, let's say, it's just, why are you going through with this? You're just basically saying you come to a tunnel, there's a key and there's a door. Why bother with the door in the first place? Just go through the tunnel, go to the next thing until you come to something interesting. So that's something to keep in mind, and puzzles can be a real trap in that sense, because they're either going to be too easy, that they're a waste of time, or too difficult, that they're frustrating and hence a waste of time. Me personally, not a big fan of them. There's a real difficult sweet spot where they're just challenging enough, or maybe they can be easy, but due to a time constraint, it becomes harder. Just an example anyway. We're going to look for ways to make these incidents suitable for the genre and the theme. So this is very applicable to the precipitating incident that kicks off your plot, your invitation, your call to adventure, your call to action. But each of the incidents along the way, it helps if they're in setting with the genre and theme. Now, obviously, you may want to mix it up. Some of the incidents might be a little bit more comedic. Some of them may be a little bit more horrific. But I would say if you're looking for a truly political situation, you want to make sure that some of these incidents are political. Generally, a variety is good, especially if some of the incidents are things that the group will naturally find challenging. So if you've got an incredibly combat-orientated group, let's face it, chat with your players. If they just want to beat something up every session and they're happy with that, do what they're happy with, by all means. Don't upset the status quo for the sake of writing a good story. You just sat around a table looking to have fun. But if you've got players that are really interested in the story, their characters, the setting, and you're wanting them to interact with the world in different ways, use a variety of skills and a variety of characters within the party, and not just have a murder hobo party, then throw them situations that are within the same theme, but different situations. You approach a library. Let's say the Varenan priest there has closed up because one of the books has been stolen, his most prized book, and without it, he is furious and refuses to allow anyone inside. But you need some information from one of those books in order to figure out the medicinal recipe, the potion, the healing draft that will save your dying child. But they won't have any of it. They're not interested. That's kind of scary stuff. You've got your time-sensitive nature already because of the fact someone's dying back home, and now you've got a situation you need to deal with. So do you... And here's where we say we don't come up with a solution for the players. We simply say, well, what are you going to do? Now, you can normally have a guess and think, well, what sort of things could they do? They could try and break in. They could try and wrestle them to the ground. They could trick them. They could try to bribe them. Now, obviously, some of these things will be less successful than others because they just wouldn't be interesting if they were easy. But it could lead to a really interesting session where maybe they do try and break in, and maybe they get into a combat encounter with the guards instead. So they still get their combat encounter, but for a brief moment, they got to at least experience what it's like to become a hero. So keep them appropriate to the genre and theme when you can. An incident is also normally something not done by the protagonist but done to the protagonist, but it can work both ways. So if they've done something in a previous incident, let someone, let's say they released a prisoner that they had, they just decided it wasn't worth taking them with, they didn't want to kill them and upset the particular gods, Myrmidia in this case, and they decided to let them go. Well, let's just say that maybe that will come back to bite them in the future. Or maybe something that seemed fairly inconsequential at the time, leaving a tip to a specific person or of a notable amount of coin. Perhaps they will be in a town, or they will have heard of their deed. There really is no shortage of opportunities here to bring something a player has done forward to make it relevant again, and it's always very encouraging and exciting when it happens. Makes them seem that there's consequences to their actions. Now, the event should also upset the status quo, so it needs to be something that is unexpected and prevents whatever was going to happen from happening. That way it is an obstacle rather than an amusement or something that is temporary and sort of fleeting in your interest. It's going to be something that is, okay, we're going to have to deal with this. So the bookkeeper, for an example, upsets the status quo. You can no longer go to the library and do this. I would say for a plot point of view, perhaps an overarching plot would be a little bit overly simplistic if it was all about reopening the library and finding out who stole the book. But really, it could still work if the book was actually a book on heretical knowledge and it turned out that the priest was actually a cultist all along. There are still interesting things you can do with that, so don't ever pin yourself down. But make sure that whatever is happening currently, whatever journey or portion of the journey the players are on, that is upset by the incident. So if you need to speak to someone, they've gone missing, so the person is no longer there. That's upsetting the status quo, definitely. So it should also create questions for the players and the audience if you're writing a book. Questions generate interest. Uncertainty generates curiosity. Although purely uncertainty, without any precipitating event that has generated some sort of time frame that this campaign's going to be set in, or some urgency, then we're going to have some issues. But combine the two together and you've got, I wonder who took the book, and he's not telling us what the book was about. That's a little bit fishy. Well, this is curious. And how did they break in? There's no signs of a break-in. So you can generate questions by having things be slightly ambiguous, atypical, and interesting. Now, each individual incident can have some sense of urgency as well, and that's also useful. So not only do you have, we need to get from town A to town B because little Timmy is dying, but we can also have, we are heading through the woods on the back of a cart. It's late in the evening and it's darker than usual due to rain clouds. Some ghouls within the woods are observing and stalking the cart, and you can see them keeping a safe distance thanks to the torches you hold in your hand, but for whatever reasons, whatever dark foul magic in the air, it's making the torches gradually grow dimmer and dimmer, and the ghouls are getting more and more brave, and thanks to the rough nature of this unkept road, the poor lighting and the driver unable to see a large pothole, the wheel snaps off and the axle breaks, leaving you faced with a large quantity of ghouls to deal with. Now the question is, how are you going to deal with them? Are you going to deal with them? Are you going to run? I don't know. I haven't decided. This is your problem, not mine. But that generates urgency, because you probably don't want to be eaten by ghouls. Same with the wolf riders chasing you down a valley and across a river. Urgency. You kind of probably want to shake a tail feather there. It's good to have something that needs to be dealt with quickly, because that helps limit the available solutions as well. But primarily because it generates tension, it generates drama, and it makes it interesting. And lastly, I would say if you can keep your central theme, so let's say you've got a war going on, a large-scale war in the overall surroundings, then as you are going from A to B, if your incidents infrequently correlate with this, it makes everything make more sense and seem more believable. So you're not just a GM throwing poo in the face of your players for the sake of it, but that war may have triggered a random group of deserters that had, well, obviously deserted, but left their regiment due to seeing too much hardship within the fight. They've left off, set up camp in the woods, and they're actually these bandits. They're having to steal food and money from passers-by in order to feed and starve themselves. Maybe they're not bandits at all, maybe they're not killing people, maybe they're kidnapping them instead. It helps if you repeat the theme that you're running through as you present more and more of these incidents along the way. That way, again, everything is in keeping with not only the genre, but the theme, the setting, the individual background, not the backstory, but the setting, really. And everything's just going to tie together beautifully. So, I feel like we've done a pretty good job now of covering story, plot, incidents. Remember, story is what your players do when they get to these incidents, and then do stuff. Obviously, if they do buy something interesting in a shop, yeah, it's part of the story. But let's face it, if you're recalling the adventure to someone else at a later date, that's not going to be one of the points that you talk about, because it's not interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for stopping on by again. I really hope you liked the video. I look forward to seeing you again in the future, and next video, we're going to be touching on how to combine the first step and the second step by doing a few individual examples, making a plot, making a series of incidents that we could move players through, making them fluid enough that we can change them on the fly if players do things we don't expect. And that, I think, is going to be a great point to use as a template to create a campaign. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you again in the next video. Remember to like and subscribe.